This is the BBC.
Simon Mayo, 88 to 91 FM, BBC Radio 2.
Hello and welcome. This is another Confessions podcast from your friends at Radio 2. Here comes a jingle to prove it. This is called ID Dollar.
88 to 91 FM,
Sounds a bit like dollar, is that right? I don't know.
BBC Radio 2.
Anyway, here come the confessions. Everyone wants your forgiveness, by the way, depending on how you're feeling. They all come before the juggernauts of justice and they need some forgiveness. This week, our concise collection features a wrecking ball, picking up the pieces, message in a bottle, and do-si-do your partner. Anyway, here they all come. Dear Father Simon, I'm writing in the hope that you can... Do I do a warning on this one? If you're having tea? No, it's fine, apparently.
Oh, right,
Our
okay.
standards are dropping.
Yeah, clearly.
Well, you know, a little bit, maybe. I'm writing in the hope that you can pardon me of a heinous crime, one that continues to wake me up in the middle of the night, fear and sweat dripping down my brow. Even now I'm sweating as I write this email. A couple of years ago, I, along with many people, started the new year with an attempt to shed pounds and return my body from its expanded state to its once natural athletic profile. To do so, I joined the local gym, accepting their January discount offer. Not knowing anybody and not wanting to pump iron and sit on a rowing machine, I enrolled into every class available, thinking I could have a bit of fun, meet new friends, and enjoy the group ethic of everyone in it together. Being an ex-rugby player, I found this very appealing and soon found myself, within a couple of weeks, boxing, spinning, boot camping. There's lots of hyphens, by the way, involved in this.
Okay.
Insanitying. I don't know
yes.
what's insanity.
That's hardcore.
Is it?
Yeah, it's an exercise.
Hardcore what?
It's like Zumba turned up to 110.
Okay.
It's not really like Zumba.
Okay.
It's an exercise regime.
Okay. Legs, bum and tumming, ab blasting, pump fixing, tai chinging, or tai chiing, and finally Pilates and dance fitting. More hyphens in one sentence than I've ever seen, by the way. He's doing all of them.
Good for him.
The latter two classes were to be my downfall. Actually, we haven't had any Pilates-based confessions. And the first incident involved the full-length mirror during my first and last dance fit class. I entered the gym for the class full of enthusiasm and also trepidation. I guessed I might be the only male, but more importantly, I have no disco coordination, so I knew it was going to be a tough ask to fit in without the odd mishap. And entering the room, which was wooden-floored and bounded by full-length mirrors at the front, I tried to hide at the back and fit in as best I could. Wrong. I was ushered to the front and proceeded to dance a bit like a horse on ice. Arms and legs totally out of synchronization with everybody else. During a rather fast-paced dance routine to Jai Ho from Slumdog Millionaire, I unfortunately got in the way of the lady next to me who wasn't at all happy. I was upsetting her well-honed routine, and I did sense a little jealousy at the attention from the 3 rows of ladies behind me. Maybe that explains what happened next, and when I was at my most unbalanced, she gave me a gentle nudge, which resulted me flying forwards and face-planting the mirror like in Tom and Jerry, slowly sliding down to the floor in a sweaty, horrible mess. Ouch, and then some. The music continued and I dragged myself back up to the amusement of the class. Undeterred, however, I enrolled for more classes. The second incident followed on later that week, and once again I found myself with 20 to 30 ladies, this time at my first and last Pilates class. And again, as a novice, I was ushered to the front, and to my surprise and her utter shock and horror, I found myself next to my nemesis from the dance class. The woman had pushed me into the mirror. All was going well. Stretching, planking, balancing. I could feel my inner core strength improving by the minute until it happened. We all had to get an inflated exercise ball about 70 centimetres in diameter. The instructor proceeded to show us a number of exercises which involved sitting, kneeling and even standing on the ball. Crikey, I thought, this has danger written all over it. So we started our routine. We had to sit on the ball and then gently roll forwards so that our bottoms were just and only just touching the ball. Not easy, as you have the horrible feeling that the ball will run away from you and you'll end up sat on the floor. I was clenching everything in the vain attempt to not let this happen when it slipped out.
Oh, no.
Not the ball, instead, as my kids used to say when younger, a little bottom burp. Now, unfortunately, this little bit of flatulence was superbly amplified by the inflated exercise ball, and the sound was evenly and loudly distributed around the gym floor.
Excellent.
I quickly thought that attack would be the best form of defence and turned to face my nemesis sat beside me, and I said, looking at her with a rather hurt and puzzled face, "Do you mind?" There was a stunned silence as all the class looked her way. It's pure playground stuff, this is. Her face turning a rather pink colour. I'm not sure whether she knew it was her or not. Then it started to uncontrollably twitch. Her friends offered her some advice. "Don't worry, Puppet, better out than in." Another one said, "Oh, squeaky floorboard." I named that tune in one.
Yes. Very good.
All things must pass.
Yeah.
All these wise comments, and so witty and amusing, were thrown at her. I have to say the rest of the class was a bit of a blur. I managed to avoid any eye contact and quickly exited as soon as possible. But I do need forgiveness for my heinous crime. I do apologise to my neighbouring ball user, and I would like to finally admit to the class it actually was me, and it wasn't her. But she did start it, you know. So, thing is, we've all been there. Let's see what Sister Bobby makes of this.
First of all, wow, what a guy. All those
Doing all those classes.
Well, also, actually, I've
Full
been in
marks.
classes where one guy walks in and has a go, and I've always thought, good on you, because it's a good way, actually, to improve your coordination and improve your dance skills. But it is really, really scary when you're put in the front and you're having to watch all these women who are wearing all the gear and are perfectly in time and have been there for 2 years with their dance routines. It is really intimidating. So well done, Stephen. And also that woman that, yeah, we've all met women like that. We've all met guys like that on those kind of those little classes that you do. And I have to say, I confess to being taken out of a yoga class for laughing so much at lots of, what's the word? Noises that you didn't expect.
Oh, really?
Yes,
Is
I
that
got
right?
banned from yoga once because I used to laugh so much. It wasn't me. It was
is
never
this
me.
quite a common, in yoga and Pilates and that kind of thing?
It's possible, yes. I'll explain
get a
later.
little windy.
So all I was going to say is, Stephen, I think it's hilarious. Well done you for the exercise classes. Keep them going.
I hadn't
and
thought of
you're
that.
absolutely forgiven.
Brother Matthew.
Well, I've never done yoga or Pilates, but
Funny that I had you down as that kind of
really?
guy,
Because
yeah.
yes, throw away those. My instinct is that this must happen all the time, because you're putting yourself into a position where nature at some point is going to intervene,
Yes.
and there is going to be something is going to happen. So really, everyone in that class does it, and it's gonna, it happens to the best of us. So there's nothing to forgive there. However, my instinct is Stephen was actually wanting to go to these things and have the ladies looking at him and him being at the front. And I think he liked all the attention. So I'm not going to forgive, because frankly, I think there was something else going on with Steve.
Dear Simon, the collective and the juggernauts of
Yeah.
justice, because that's who you
Boom.
are. This is from Tony, by the way. After hearing many brave souls confessing their manifold sins and wickedness, I feel that my dark secret could be purged from my conscience by your team. In the mid-1970s, I was a young teacher in a former grammar school in County Durham. Most of the younger staff ran a wide range of extracurricular activities, both sporting and cultural. Amongst these was a very active chess club, run by a colleague which met in my form room every lunchtime. This is a chess confession, by the way.
Long overdue.
Yeah, we haven't had many. I'm sure there'll be some more coming in after this. All was well until said colleague was appointed to a senior position in another school. No one came forward to take the chess club on, so in desperation, he turned to me. "Oi, Tony," he says, "will you do it? You just have to keep an eye on things at lunchtime, ferry them to away matches, and make sure everything is set up for the home games. The sixth formers will sort out the team selection and all that sort of stuff." I pointed out, to my shame, whilst I could name the chess pieces, I had no idea what they actually did. So I could hardly be in charge of chess club, but this was felt relatively unimportant compared to my ability to drive the school minibus. And in a nutshell, I became Mr. Chess, which is how I was referred to from this moment on. The first league fixture came along and I duly chauffeured the team along to our opponents in Sunderland. True to prediction, the senior team members had arranged the team and soon 12 heads were bent over chessboards whilst I enjoyed a coffee. Come 6 o'clock, 2 matches were still in progress and my opposite number on their staff said cheerfully, "Well, it's about time. Should we go and adjudicate those 2 games?" Because apparently that's why if it's still going, you have to adjudicate and then just kind of work out who's going to be winning. Now, what I should have done at this point was to confess that I was merely the driver and didn't have a clue as to what the chessboard was telling me or what any of the pieces did. But instead, my mouth said, "OK, certainly, let's go and adjudicate these 2 games." By now, common sense had left the building and I gazed at the chessboard with panic whilst trying to look intelligent and thoughtful. Fortunately, at that moment, inspiration reared its ugly head. I scratched my head, I scratched my beard. I pointed at the various pieces of the board, muttered a few words like Boris Spassky, threatening, Bobby Fischer, Garry Kasparov, vulnerable opening. Then, most importantly, I counted the pieces left on the board for each player. And if our opponent had more pieces than my player, I would predict a draw. And if my player had more pieces, it was a win to us. Now, as you can see from this, impartiality took something of a backseat, and I made my predictions in a clear, confident voice, always important, fully expecting to be challenged, at which point I would be able to save face by agreeing, as they were obviously better chess players than I. But Father Simon, there was not a whimper and no challenge, just tacit agreement, and we left with the points in the bag. Now, the thing is, I'm not really begging for forgiveness for this moment of madness on my part, because it didn't stop there. For the next 4 years of matches, I applied my system regularly, just counting up the pieces. If we had more pieces, we won. If they had more pieces, it's a draw. Who needs judges? Just make it up. Anyway, I applied my system and gained a reputation as some kind of chess grandmaster who could see all manner of solutions, as my prognosticators were never challenged. I imagine that should be prognostications, but anyway, they weren't challenged either. So instead, I'm asking for forgiveness from our opponents, who probably felt that having such an expert judging them was rather daunting and put them off their game. And clearly, many of these matches we won when we should have lost. And this is a humiliating sporting chess confession from Tony. I mean, you would think that he would get rumbled, because there would be people who would just know, say, hang on, no, he's in a better position. You can't just count up the number of pieces, because if you've got all your pawns left, that doesn't count, as opposed to if you've got your rooks and your bishops and the king and the
knowledge,
and the king and the queen.
And the king and the queen, yeah.
Yeah, so anyway, I'm just telling you all that.
Yeah, bishops, yeah.
Do you know what checkmate means, what the origin is? This is my exciting chess fact.
Go on.
No, go on.
It means the king is dead.
Oh.
Something.
I'm just telling you.
In what?
That's its origin. Arabic, I think.
Oh, right.
So the origin is the king is dead, and that's what checkmate is.
Yeah,
there
of
you go,
course.
and you can pass that on and sound intelligent. That's a genuine,
Yeah. Wow.
genuine chess fact. That's
Yes.
a factoid.
A factoid.
That's a chess factoid.
We should do that.
We
Oh,
should.
no, hang on.
Sister Bobby, what do you say to Tony? Sorry, I got distracted there by my facts.
That's all right.
That's not an alternative fact
No.
either.
Yeah,
It's a
no.
proper
Fact.
fact.
Yes. Yeah, yeah.
I can prove it. Anyway,
Okay.
I
Sister
know
Bobby,
nothing
Tony.
about chess. I always thought it was fancy drafts. I always thought the rules were pretty much the
Yeah,
same.
it is a little bit.
Yeah, is it? Okay, that's all right. Tony, you are not forgiven. You're a teacher. You're a man of importance.
Yeah, that's true.
You're a position of power, and you abuse that position. The trust of everybody.
He could
And
drive the
did-
minibus, though.
Yes, I know. You see, first of all, it was admin, I understood. And maybe the first one you got away with, but there was a perfect opportunity for you to learn chess. You were head of the chess club. You didn't take that opportunity. You lied to everybody. Someone must have seen it, surely.
They must have been a fantastically successful chess club, though. Imagine that. You know, obviously the North East was the place to be.
Is there any sense with his kind of idea that if there's more, no, so I'm got no. So basically, I don't know
it
how
could-
you got away with
Well,
it.
it could be that if you've got more pieces, then you're in a better position, but it doesn't prove anything.
No.
Does it, Matt?
No,
Tony,
it doesn't.
Unforgiven.
Unforgiven.
Well, I think this story says more about the kids taking part in this chess club than it does about Tony, because obviously they were prepared to accept the decision of the referee as final, so that good for them. However, 4 years, it's not that difficult to work out what the rooks do and the knights and rooks,
you would think
as opposed to castles.
after 4 years you might have learned
Yeah,
it.
I mean, come on. Yeah, they move sideways, they move diagonally, they move wherever they like. So I'm going to say not forgiven, because frankly, just a little bit lazy, Tony.
Simon and the Juggernauts of Justice. My confession takes place when I was in the third year of my mechanical engineering degree, and having failed to secure a summer job, I'd come back to my mother and father's and back to my old bedroom, just like in T2 Trainspotting.
Oh, yeah.
When you go back to your old bedroom and everything is exactly the same. Yeah, remember that? You know all that? Yeah. We weren't a wealthy family, says Moo, so resources, and particularly for the purposes of this story, alcohol, were rationed or hidden, especially if they belonged to my parents. Prior to my imminent arrival back to the family nest, my parents went to visit my sister, her husband and her children, who lived in Salou in Spain at the time. Arriving back, they brought a 1-litre bottle of gin. And to be honest, I had never seen such a beast. That's a lot of gin.
That's a lot of gin.
Is that a lot
Good
of gin,
gin.
mate?
That's a lot of
That's
gin.
a lot of gin. It's a Laura gin.
Yeah.
Okay. As the evenings were frankly boring, back at my parents', I took to walking around in the fields with the family dog and my hip flask of gin and tonic water, at all times drinking responsibly.
Obviously and moderately, yeah.
This was, of course, the height of sophistication.
Yeah, no, it was.
I was an exotic adventurer, an agent for the East India Company with pith hat and stiff upper lip, going to places no one had seen before. My parents, however, knowing nothing of my travels, just said, "Oi, keep off the gin." Well, I mean, really, how ungenerous can your parents be? In fact, such was their commitment to me not shortening their supplies, I began to notice little notches appearing in the label, which matched the level of the liquid in the bottle. However, this wasn't going to put me off. I continued to fill the juniper-infused liquid into my hip flask, but to avoid suspicion, I filled the gin bottle back up to the notch in the label with, you guessed it, tap water. Now, we have a bunch of confessions which are similar to this until this point. The bottle was 2/3 full when this all began, and was not far from that mark after my entire summer break ended, which sadly put an end to the hip flask accompanied walks of the dog and my East India travels around the Orient collecting spices.
In a field.
In a field with
With
the
a
dog.
dog.
However, Father Simon, as heinous as this crime was, this isn't what I want to confess. Fast forward to 10 years later. I'm married with 2 young daughters, back at my parents' for a visit. After a nice dinner, I asked if they had anything stronger than wine, which we just quaffed, and commented, since it was a lovely summer evening, maybe a little gin and tonic wouldn't go amiss. My mother looked at me in horror and said they had not drunk gin for nearly 10 years. "Why's that then?" I asked, slightly apprehensively. My mum then proceeded to tell me that they had once bought a 1-litre bottle back from Spain, but when they drank it, the gin had no effect on them at all. Fearing that they may be turning into alcoholics, they decided there and then to stop drinking on the spot.
Wow, that is great.
She then went on to say they'd only recently started to drink wine again, just in the last few months. So Moo was basically responsible for the fact they stopped drinking. Father Simon, I do feel guilty, but in my defence, they did put notches on the bottle. And if you think about it, maybe I helped them live quite a few years longer due to their healthier lifestyle. Plus, I'd like to say that gin bottle in my hip flask went down rather well. Well, who would have thought? Because there are lots and lots of, yes, so I just added water, topped it up and they didn't notice, or they did notice, or whatever. But we've never had a story like that where, because of that, the parents so worried that they've had a gin and tonic and just feels as though it was like tonic. Well, guess what? It was just tap water. That's why it had no effect. Anyway, what do you think, Sister Bobby?
Well,
Who never forgives anyone, as we learned yesterday.
No, but I have to say, that was a bit of a surprise, that one.
Yeah.
I didn't see that one coming at all. Well, Moo, I think actually in the early days you were drinking responsibly, just having a little bit each night in your hip flask. You know, a little gin and tonic, you walk the dog. It seems like a quite safe thing to do.
Do you think?
And actually, by accident, you did actually stop your mum and dad from drinking.
Yes.
I mean, it was by accident, it wasn't by design, which is a good thing. So I don't think anything bad has happened here. So you didn't, I suppose you did intend to cheat your parents out of some gin instead of buying your own. But actually on this occasion, because the consequences were so great, you stopped your parents drinking for 10 years. I think actually I'm going to forgive you.
Oh, look
There
at
you
that.
go.
She's going against type.
She's
Yeah.
turned.
Brother Matthew.
Well, here's the problem I have here. Who's putting gin and tonic in a hip flask? That's not going to work. It's just going to go flat. No one at all is putting gin and tonic in a hip flask. And the other thing to say is, if you really do drink from a bottle of gin and it tastes of water, or basically doesn't taste of anything at all, then surely you would say something's been going on with the gin. Do you remember that time when Moo was staying here and used to go out in the fields with the dog and the hip flask? Maybe that's why the gin doesn't
And
taste
the whole
of anything.
summer, it stayed at the same
and all
level.
of that was going on. So, I mean, far be it from me to say that the parents are a bit thick. But what I will say is that clearly their taste buds weren't up to scratch. So, yes, forgive them.
BBC Radio 2.
Father Simon in the exoneration squad. I feel it's time to confess to a terrible sin committed as an errant schoolboy back in the early 80s. I think this might send shudders down a few spines. I was 14 at the time, obsessed with Scalextrics, BMX bikes and ZX Spectrums, and still blissfully mystified by that other obsession most teenagers develop at one point or another, the opposite sex. On the occasion I'm writing about, my class and I, the rest of the school, were sitting in morning assembly, listening to the usual headmaster's announcements, singing dreary hymns and fidgeting as usual, when unexpectedly the female and male PE teachers took to the stage for a special announcement for third-year pupils. Third year was my year. They announced that the normal PE lessons on the following day would not be taking place, as the school was playing host to some special visitors who would be running an afternoon workshop. The teachers, who obviously milked that moment for all it was worth, paused long enough to hear the whoops and cheers and cries of glee from myself and the other third years before they dropped their bombshell. The visitors, who will be replacing the afternoon's normal PE session, will be hosting a special afternoon of country dancing.
Yes.
And so on. Trapped there in assembly, the full enormity of this announcement slowly sank in. Made worse when the teachers also gleefully announced that male and female pupils will be expected to partner up for the session. So if you have a dance partner in mind, please approach them after assembly or during playtime or break time. If you can't find a partner, staff will find one for you and pair you up. Imagine the horror. I did country dancing at primary school, and I had quite a nice partner, as I remember, but it was still a shocking event. Country dancing is like torture. Anyone else country danced?
Primary school. So I get primary school.
Yeah.
But once you get this is something.
I've hurtled round a maypole in my time.
I'm sure you certainly have. Father Simon, I must admit that at 14 years old, lacking the modern ways of getting to know the female of the species, such as emailing, using social media or texting, I had a deep-rooted fear of the opposite sex. The thought that I would have to somehow A, approach a girl, and B, partner up with her to be shown how to dance convincingly in a country style, or C, have a partner chosen for me by a member of staff, quite frankly, terrified the living daylights out of me. I think a number of people will be nodding at this point. My brain went into overdrive. Like many of my friends, I knew that there was only one way out of the situation, and that was to play hooky for the day and bunk off school. Now, obviously, I can't condone such behaviour. Now, I'm a responsible grown-up parent. But at the time, it was that or the mind-crushing embarrassment of country dancing. So I hatched what to my tiny adolescent brain felt like the perfect plan. The next day I put it into action. I waved goodbye to my grandmother, as usual. I was living with her at the time. Headed off to school. I actually spent a fantastic day deep in the local woodlands near our home, easily passing a blissful... Obviously, you know, this is true and it's a bad thing.
Very bad.
Thank you. Passing a blissful day in the sunshine, scoffing my packed lunch, keeping a low profile and watching the hours crawl by till home time.
Yes.
Some of that.
Yeah.
But then I was left with another problem, the sick note. Somehow I would have to produce a convincing note for my form teacher the next day to explain my absence. However, the next part of my plan was possibly my finest piece of Roger the Dodger-style finagling ever. I decided that I convinced my poor Nan we were collecting people's handwriting for school because we had a visiting graphologist who would analyse the writing and come up with the character assessment of that person based on their scrawl. Oh, and it had to be a parent or guardian, obviously. In my fantasy-fueled idiot brain, the plan seemed almost foolproof. If I could get get my nan to write a few short lines and sign her name on a piece of paper, I could then complete the letter with my best forger's hand, stick it in an envelope, hand it to my teacher. It couldn't fail, surely. I put my plan into action. I managed to get my poor nan to write all the best and then sign her name on a convenient piece of paper I'd rather expertly folded so I'd have enough room for a description of my mystery 24-hour illness. I sneaked upstairs to my room to complete the letter before sticking it in an envelope. I was ready. Whatever happened, I still retained the slight smug feeling that whatever punishment school could mete out, if my plan failed, I still escaped the fate worse than death, which is, as you know, country dancing. No offence, by the way. The next day I met several of my classmates who were still wincing with embarrassment about their dance escapades. There had been apparently holding of hands, figures of 8, cloverleaf turns, hey-ho for Sir Roger de Coverley, that was one, and the Grand Old Duke of York was another. Come on, kids. The boys, there were all sorts of unpleasantness, Father Simon. Yeah. The boys were still being teased about their terrible performances by the girls, and all watching to see how I'd pass off my skyvitis, a hitherto unknown medical condition that affected many school children in this era at this time. Naturally, in order to complete the illusion, I had to maintain that I genuinely was ill. It was an unfortunate coincidence that I had a sick note to prove it. That's enough country dancing. With a few chesty coughs and an almost Oscar-winning performance of I'm still recovering, I produced my note and handed it in. The teacher unfolded the envelope, read the note, and amazingly, it worked. I'd actually managed to pass it off as genuine, a curt nod. And my teacher said, "Could you perform a quick Roger de Coverley, Philip, if I asked you to?" No, sir. Of course I couldn't. When I returned home, Nan asked me how my day had gone as usual and also asked about the graphologist's verdict as to what her personality was. For a moment, I hadn't a clue what she was talking about, and then I remembered my horrible and elaborate fib. I somehow managed to make up something fairly convincing sounding, apparently her being a strong and determined character who didn't suffer fools gladly. This was patently true. She smiled sweetly, took it as a compliment, and nothing more was said. I think it's fair to say I've dwelled on this horrid issue of fibs, tissue of lies for many years and seek forgiveness, not on behalf of the school or the visiting country dance troupe, who were, to be fair, sprung on us at very short notice. I don't seek forgiveness from my fellow pupils who had to suffer, but I do seek forgiveness from my dear departed Nan, who unwittingly took part in this deception, taking her grandson's word that her expertly delivered character assessment was of the highest calibre. In my defence, I should also add that I never tried to play hooky ever again, and thankfully the country dancing troupe never revisited the school, though I wonder how many other 80s kids had to suffer something similar. Well, I think they did in the 80s, I think they did in the 70s, I think they did in the 60s. It was a thing. I know, kids, let's go country dancing. No, thank you, sir, we don't really want to. Never mind, partner up or I'll find someone for you. What a horror it was. Anyway, Phil needs some forgiveness. What do you say there, Bobby?
Phil, I'm on the fence here because, first of all, you should never cheat at school. You should never lie. You should never do any of those things. Don't play hooky. But having said
you can play hockey.
Well, you don't not necessarily like hockey. But the thing is, also, I don't think the school should have done it to them. You know, country dancing, if it's not part of your thing, I mean, country dancing, like a ceilidh, is fantastic if you're a willing volunteer, you know, and participant. But this is awful. Don't do this, especially to teenagers who don't know each other. It's never going to come out well, is it? It's just not going to. So why did the PE teachers do this to them? It's not fair. I really don't think it's fair. So I understand why you did it. So I think I'm going to have to forgive, even though you lied.
Novice Nige.
Well, I've only just realised that Kurt Nod isn't a friend or relative of Sir Roger de Coverley, but I would like to see... And I think, by the way, that was a sailor's hornpipe.
You're dressed as though you could go country dancing right now.
Superb. He always looks fabulous,
kind of like from a Jethro Tull convention.
Yeah, Jethro Tull, very topical, of course. At the moment on the show, and very floral indeed it is. But Phil, how enterprising. I mean, to avoid all that male and female pairing up and holding of hands, etc. I thought that was incredibly clever, and of course not to be condoned on a regular basis, but to go to the woods and play hooky, yes, you're absolutely forgiven.
What do you say there, Brother Matthew?
Well, clearly Phil has learnt his lesson, and obviously we don't condone, and obviously all those things. And it seemed to me at first glance that his excuse was about as likely to pass muster as graphology is to stand up to science. Really? But it turned out it did. So who'd have thought? So I am going to not forgive.
Well, they were this week's confessions. Did you forgive anyone? I suspect probably not. If you have a shadowy secret and you want to just pass it on and just have a laugh, maybe inspired by one of those. I mean, maybe the farty one, but I've got a farty one ready to go next week, and that might have, that's our allowance, because we have a fart allowance, and that's probably, in fact, I've probably mentioned that word too often already. Anyway, confessions at bbc.co.uk. All the drive time shows, in case you missed them, there in all their glory. You can check back on Giles Corran, joining us on Monday to talk about eating pigeons and other things, with a new show Further Back in Time for Dinner. Tuesday was a Tuesday with the Stranglers and John Miles, The Jam and Pink Floyd. Wednesday, Mark Gatiss was in, played a lot of Mary Poppins as well. But anyway, Mark was talking Sherlock, Taboo, Doctor Who and his new play The Boys in the Band. And for Foodie Thursday, Nigel was in talking about a ciabatta di verdure, which is, as you know, some vegetables shoved into a loaf of bread, but with a whole lot of style. So now, if you made it to the end of last week's podcast, I asked you to tweet Plenty O'Toole, just to let me know that you'd actually got to the end, showing some commitment. Thanks to Billy the Kid, Joanne, Anna and others who made it to precisely this point. So this week's code phrase, if you do the Twitter thing, is you give me tuppence and I'll give you a Zoltzwang. I know it's a little bit cumbersome, but it made me laugh. Hey, and another jingle for your pains.